Diary of a Hagen. My name is Caitlin Hagen, and I'm here with my husband, Cameron Hagen.
Hello. Today we're going to talk about how finances play a role in relationships.
Specifically, our focus will be on how finances play a role in our relationship and how it has been for the last 9 years. So, for us specifically, since the beginning, since we first started dating, we have never really been this is your money, this is my money, and we've never really done 50-50. It's always been what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. And as long as things are covered and we have what we need, then the wants just kind of played out how they played.
They just kind of played, but it was never. We also kind of played it as, I pay this bill, you pay that bill, but if you need help, then that's fine. To help each other out. It was never, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. Especially as you carry on to your relationship and as you get married and further on, you just can't. It's hard. You can operate that way, but it's hard to operate as what's mine is mine and yours is yours, because then you're not intermingling your lives together. You're trying to keep two separate lives completely by doing that, and that boils over past financials to just personal items, not just financials if you do that.
Well, I want to talk about that for a minute, though, because I personally know several different couples who do have what's my money is mine and what's your money is yours, and they make it work for them. I think every relationship and every personality is different. So if your relationship, if that's what works for you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For us, though, we have always been more of we are a team. Especially after we became married, we became one in the sense of the word. So we are here for each other. We're not here for us individually. You know what I mean? Like, we as a married couple are one, so our bills are our bills. It's not you cover this bill, I'll cover that. It's let's put our money together, let's cover the bills, and then afterwards, if 1 week you want a tool or a set of Legos or a dinner or whatever it is that you may desire, well, then that's fine. Okay, we'll do that. And then the next week, if there's something that I want, like, a skincare routine, something for my skincare routine, or a piece of clothing, or whatever, then we've kind of always just made it very equal. Like, we've never really been more of a, well, I want this, so sorry, sucks for you type of person. I don't feel like. We've always just kind of been very willing to give to the other.
Yeah, we have for the most part. I mean, we all have our flaws, but for the most part, and we always, main priority is bills come first.
Yes.
Come hell or high water, bills always come first. And they take priority over just wanting just something. After the bills are paid, then we back up and regroup and go, okay, well, yeah, I can get that, or I can help you get your skincare product or that tool or whatever you need, but priority first is that the bills always come first. And you have to understand that, unfortunately, bills come with life. Unless you live certain types of lifestyles, bills always come with just general life. We all have to pay taxes, we all have to buy food generally, have to pay our power bill, gotta get water, most of us have vehicles, gotta put gas in it, things like that, and you just have to live with that fact, but you have to prioritize what comes first to you.
Agreed. I think what's interesting too is when you think about finances in a relationship, typically you're only thinking about like a career, or your job, like wherever you make your income off of, and that's it. But like what we were talking about earlier, we had a discussion earlier in the car about stay-at-home parents and those who have an income, but it's not like a steady income. Typically, when you're discussing finances, like when you're not in a relationship, or like when you're new to a relationship, or just in general, very generalized, those people kind of get left out. And so it's really important when you're in a relationship, or when you want to start a relationship, or in the beginning of one, if one of you in the future plans on becoming a stay-at-home parent, or having a job that's not your typical, job, that you discuss that with each other. That way, when that time comes, you've already got that planned out. That way, the person who is the breadwinner, so to say, if they're out, working and bringing home the money, and you're at home being the parent, or whatever it is that you're doing, that they still see your value and your worth. Even though you're not bringing a paycheck, you're still adding just as much to the family as the person going out and making the money. Because a lot of the times that can get very messy if that's not talked about, because unfortunately that's not something that is glorified, I guess. That's not really the correct word, but
close enough. I mean,
people just think of it as like, oh, well, you're just lazy, you just stay at home, you sleep all day, or you don't do anything. And realistically, if you really break down what stay-at-home parents, I don't want to say stay-at-home mom, because there's plenty of dads that stay home, like, just stay-at-home parents, they do a lot more than that. Even though to you it may not seem that way, because maybe when when you come home, they're on the couch watching TV with the kid, or they're having a break or something. Like, you don't see what they do all day.
Yeah, you're not seeing them get up early in the mornings, or packing lunch, or staying up late making sure laundry's getting done. You don't see stuff like that, so people just focus too much on what costs money. I mean, and who makes more money, when that's not really what it's about.
Yeah. It's about what you add to a relationship. It's not just about, the money maker. Because, and I think that's why it's important for when you're getting into a relationship that you discuss finances, because it's important, because there's some people who do want the 50-50 type of relationship and money. And if you're a stay-at-home parent, well then, you're not bringing in income. And if that's going to be a problem for them, well, that's not really a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and you have to figure out what works for you may not work for everybody else.
Yeah.
And you have to figure that out for yourself. Because what works for us won't necessarily work for you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us all different. And you just have to worry about you and your family, not me and my family.
Yeah, exactly.
And just figure that out on what works. And go from there. Because everybody in every relationship is different.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think typically those who say like they do 50-50 I don't think it's a very common practice. It may be becoming more common nowadays, but I don't believe it was necessarily common practice because of the stay-at-home parent. Because really, like, you're saving a bunch by not sending your children to childcare, because that can be upwards of $1,000 or more, and you're saving that by staying home. And for a lot of people, especially nowadays, it is cheaper to have a parent stay home with a child because of the expenses of childcare and the time. Because I think a lot of people, especially if you don't have children, don't think about the time limits that school puts on you, because like, you have to have them at school by a certain time. You have to pick them up by a certain time. If you don't have, those helpmates or those helpers, whether it be family or friends, to help you take care of your child, well, that puts limits on you of, well, I have to be home by this time, or I have to be leaving the office or my job by this time to be able to get to my child, to pick them up, take them home, do dinner, do homework, spend time with them, and then you have shower and bath, teeth, and then bed, and then you start your day all over again. So it's really important in the beginning of a relationship to discuss things like that, because that's going to eventually pop up, unless you don't plan on having children, which are plenty of people out there who prefer to not have children. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. But you also have to go back to even just time with each other, plays roles and all that. But back to the financial side of it, is you just have to figure out what works for you and your family. Because sometimes people have spending habits that the other doesn't agree on. And so they're like, well, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to feed this, not addiction, but problem. Whether it be, a hobby, or makeup, or clothes, or whatever it is. So sometimes 50-50 works better just for that one simple fact. And you just have to figure out, but that goes back to communication, and saying, hey, this is a real problem for me, I don't like it, this doesn't work for me, I'm glad it works for you, but it doesn't work for me, and truly talking about it, instead of just making assumptions that it works. Some people have issues not sharing money because, and some people get upset that one person makes more than the other. You see it a lot in relationships where people get upset over stuff like that.
In my experience, typically, or at least in my experience, that usually happens with the male gender.
Yeah.
The one that gets more upset if they're not the one making the big bucks.
Yep.
And that can cause some issues. And I'm glad that you brought up communication, because that's actually like a really good topic and can really be broken down into several different subtopics. Because communication is so important. And if you can begin your relationship on open communication, you're going to be so much better off. Because if you can sit down and have the tough conversations, finances can be a tough one. Time can be a tough one. How you're managing your time. Because as you continue to grow together and life continues to happen, and you have friends and work and a home life, and if you do have children, you have to throw in your children, and if you have faith, your church, and having that is just so important to talk about your time together, how you want to spend your time, what both of your morals are, how what you both see as important in relationships, not just in your marriage, but also as a parent. For me personally, I think it's really important to spend one-on-one time with children. I like to call them dates with your kids. That's very important.
Yeah, but to me, it's not as important as it is to her. But there's things that are more important to me, like spending time with each other, that she doesn't put as much of a priority on.
I wouldn't say I don't put as much as a priority.
It's not.
It's definitely a learning curve.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to balance, and finding balance when you're thrown into something can be very difficult. And
it can be.
It's not as simple as saying you're going to do something. You have to actually put the action behind it, and that can be difficult. Yeah. Finding the balance of everything that you're responsible for.
Yeah. And then deciding what's more important. Sometimes, people, we call them I call them dollar chasers. In our industry, that's what we call them. People decide to chase the dollar. And that's what's more important to them, so then they start throwing their family to the side because they're more worried about the almighty dollar. And then the spouse goes, well, he's making money, or she's making money, so I can't really say a whole lot because it's work.
Yeah, then you feel guilty for wanting to say something.
Yeah.
And which goes back to communication, because you should be allowing your anybody, not just your spouse, since we're talking about that here, you should be allowing your spouse to have open communication with you without immediately becoming defensive or feeling like they're attacking you or saying what you're doing is wrong, because that's not always the case. Yeah, and again, in my experiences, that's rarely ever the case. It's more of, this isn't really working. It's not your fault. We decided this together. Let's see if we can compromise, come up with something that works for both of us, and then implement that, and then we can, reevaluate a little bit down the line in a few months or however long. Having open communication is being able to validate what the other person's feeling or saying, not laughing it off, not rolling your eyes, not becoming defensive. It's just truly sitting down, listening to just listen, not listening to respond. That's so important to remember that too, because when you're listening to respond, you're not fully allowing what the other person said to process in your head and in your heart. You're listening just to come up with the words to say to respond back to it, and that can cause some problems.
Listening with intent.
Yeah.
That's the key. It's listening with intent. Is what you have to remember to do. Because you got to remember that's... I don't know how to explain it. You just have to listen, like she said, without... to try to respond. Because you could easily listen to something and go, okay, they said the sky's blue, but really it's more of a light blue. But you're too concerned about the fact that, what color they said it was. You're not focused on the fact that they were talking about the clouds and the birds and everything else they said. You were so focused on one fact because you were just listening to respond. You weren't processing what they were really telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
And what they were really telling you was everything about the sky and what they loved about the sky. And they thought it was so beautiful today because there was just a light mist in the air and, everything about it was just different today. But all you heard was the sky was blue.
And I think, too, adding to that, something that's really important when it comes to having conversation, especially with finances, is being able to stay calm and both of you being able to voice your thoughts and your opinions and truly trying to come together and be like, okay, this is what you want, this is what I want, and finding something in the middle and trying that out for a little bit. And then sometimes in relationships, it's a very give and take. Sometimes one person's going to end up compromising more than the other because it's not going to necessarily affect them as much as the other person. So then the next time or whatever else, another conversation down the line, the other person may end up compromising a little bit more because in this situation they'll be able to. And again, that just goes back to having that open communication and remembering that you're on the same team. It's not you versus each other. It's you two as one versus the world. That's really important to remember too, which again can be applied back to finances and why it has worked so well for us to be one and have one thought, process, I suppose, how you can word it, and saying okay, bills get paid first, and then it's our needs, our house products and vehicle, gas and things like that, and then we kind of go to wants, is there something that we want? Do we want to save up for something? Things along those lines.
Well, not to where, for some people, now we're not budgeters, but
no, we should be, though.
Should be, but we're not. But some people work really well with a budget because they can say, okay, we have a budget, we know we're getting X amount of dollars over X amount of time, so, look, the wife gets $100 a week, the husband gets $100 a week, they do whatever they want with it, I don't care. We've got a budget for everything else. We know what our power is roughly. We know when that comes in. We know when this comes in. We know that. And it's easy to go, okay, alright, we got this because we have a budget. So you can go, if you want to save your money to buy some $400 something, You go right on ahead. I don't care. Because
that money was already spoken for anyway.
Yeah, it was accounted for.
So what you're using it on doesn't really matter at this point because it was already spoken for anyways.
Yep. It was accounted for and you just saved it up over the course of time.
Maybe eventually that's where we'll be, but we're not there right now.
And that works for some people. Now, we're just not budget people in general. We never have been. Maybe we need to because it helps with finances in general. But our income has not always been the most steady on exactly like or give or take.
I think a lot of people their income is not a steady income. I mean, depending on the type of work that you have, you know, it can be, unless you're salary, typically your income can go up and down, and that can be kind of difficult to, unless you have like a base, like, okay, this is like the bare minimum of what we need to do, and then anything after that will apply accordingly.
Yeah.
That's a good way if you don't have like a very steady income.
Yeah. And it's hard too if both people don't have steady incomes.
Yeah.
Because at one time I did, but she didn't.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, you just have to figure it out. And go from there. And seeing what works for you and your family. But again, communication's the key to it all in the end.
Yeah.
If you can't communicate with each other without getting irritated and mad and just a big old fight, then the other's not going to want to talk because they're like, well, it's just going to turn into a fight anyway, so might as well just get what I want and fight about it later.
And for some people, it can be really difficult to have, you know, communication. Like, you were kind of difficult to have open communication with.
Nope.
And
the most easy to talk to.
Yeah, so I think sometimes if you can start small and then build your way up to the more important things, that's what I don't know if you noticed that's what I did, but that's what I kind of did with you. And also sometimes you just gotta keep at it. They may get frustrated with you, but in the long haul they're gonna be thankful that you pushed them because they're like, oh, okay, like that actually felt really good to talk about. I don't have to like pin that up inside of me anymore. I realize that I can now communicate that with you.
Yeah, because sometimes they're on the same playing field as you, and you just never realized it because you just never talked about it.
Yeah.
When really they were on the same field the entire time.
Yeah.
But you just were like, no, the way they act, the way they talk, they're just not on the same playing field as me. So there's no way we can agree on this, and I just ain't in the mood to fight about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to turn this into some big argument. And then it just turns into something more than what it's worth.
Financials can definitely be a tough conversation. Especially if you are already set in your ways and you're not really willing to compromise. Then, or if you're like a really heavy spender and trying to like have that conversation and, you know, bring that into your relationship, that can be difficult too. And also, something that is really, or can be really difficult is when you've been single, especially as an adult, because there's a difference between single as an adult and then as like a teenager and younger. When you're an adult single, you're only responsible for yourself typically. Like, you know, especially if you're not a parent. Typically, you're only responsible for yourself, or if you are, even if you are a parent, you're only responsible for you and your kids. So adding in that spouse and now having to think about another adult, because thinking about children and another adult are two completely different things. Because your child, if you're the one raising them, most of the time they're gonna be like you. They're gonna have like your same or similar morals, similar wants, similar needs, like, and you know them, you know, like, you know what they need, you know what they like, and they've already been incorporated into your lifestyle, so it's just, it is what it is, you know, like, it doesn't feel any different. It's not like, it's just not difficult necessarily, but adding in another adult human, your spouse, can be difficult to incorporate, because now you're like, oh, like, okay, now I have this whole other human to think about their emotions and their feelings and and adults, you would think, are more capable of communicating how they feel and what they want and need, but that's not always the case. And because you don't know them like you do yourself, or if you have children, your children, and if they're not willing to communicate with you, it adds just a whole nother level of stress and just so many, I can't think of the words, just so many more things. And it adds more financial, strain. And even if they're bringing income with them, if you're only used to being responsible for you or for you and your kids, you don't think about another adult, like you're not thinking about having to incorporate another adult's opinions or another adult's wants or needs or things along those lines, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Because, you gotta remember that they like certain types of food, they like certain types of sheets, they like, things that cost money, and they don't always like the same things that you or even if you have children before or after, as you.
Yeah.
Or your children. And you have to be considerate of those kind of things because they're human too. But it got, really a lot of it boils back down to communication in a lot of areas.
Yeah, definitely. Communication is a really, really big thing in any relationship, not just with a spouse. That goes back to parent and child, friendships, your faith, your relationship with Jesus, your church, your job. That's really important to have communication there. Communication just with even a stranger on the side of the road. Communication is just a really, really important thing. And if you can learn to communicate in a healthy way, I don't want to say proper, but in a healthy way, it can just change. It really can change your life.
Well, yeah, because there's no proper per se, because everybody's way of communicating is totally different.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why it's not really proper, but...
Well, there's proper, when it comes to careers and such, because there are degrees you can get in communication. So that's what I meant, but I didn't want to say proper.
Yeah. But it's communication is key to any good relationship as a whole, because if they don't know that you didn't like the way they cooked the fish and you said, oh, it tasted great, when really you thought it was disgusting, they're going to keep cooking it that way.
And that sounds so silly, and that's the thing in communication too, is some stuff that you have to discuss, it sounds so silly. But what may be silly to you is not silly to them. Maybe, let's use the fish, for example. Maybe that is a tradition in their family. Maybe that is, how they make it in their culture. Maybe that's how, I don't know, there's several different ways. And to you it seems so silly, ooh, this fish is so nasty. But to them, if you communicate to them, you may realize that to you, something that was so small and silly, to them really means a lot.
Yeah, because it could have been their mama's famous recipe throughout their family, and now they're offended, but really that's never your intention, per se, but...
we can use that kind of as an example, because, that mint sauce that you like, which is... It smells disgusting. It's basically mint and vinegar. Yeah. And to me, I'm like, that's just nasty. And I kind of laughed it off. I didn't, prevent you from buying or anything. I wasn't trying to be, rude or heartless. But I was just like, I'm not eating that. But I didn't, stop you from eating it. You're more than welcome to use it on whatever you would like on your separate plate.
Yeah. But that goes back to communication, because she didn't like it. And that's fine if she don't like it. I don't expect her to like it, but that's something that I grew up eating and stuff like that. So, that's what I like. That's something I haven't had in years, and I finally found it again. But she's over here I ain't having it on my plate. But, and communication, because sometimes you cook with it, and if she doesn't like it, now I know not to even attempt to cook with it, because she ain't gonna eat it. But she had to communicate that with me, and say, look, I ain't touching that stuff, because I don't like it. And that's cool. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Ain't no shame in it. But you have to communicate back and say, hey, I just don't like that stuff. I'm sorry. Thanks, but no thanks.
And I think too, it's really important to, again, not to get defensive about that. Just because I don't like a mint sauce doesn't mean that I'm trying to downplay or invalidate what it means to you. Because obviously, to you, it means something more than just a sauce. It reminds you of your dad.
Yep.
And so that wasn't like, I wasn't trying to be ill-mannered. Like, I didn't have any ill
intention.
Yeah, there we go. Ill intentions behind it. It's just not. It's not something my taste buds, like. And so I think that's really important to remember. Just because somebody doesn't like something doesn't mean that they're trying to be hateful toward you. That's just not their cup of tea, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant to be the exact same. That's what makes this world so great. Usually, it's because we all are different. And we are a big melting pot. And if you would be willing to just accept other people for who they are and what they are, and learn from them and incorporate, different things, then it's so amazing, like, what can happen when you're just open-minded and to that. We've strayed so far from finances, but that's okay.
But that's where you have to remember, too, that when you communicate, that you're not coming off in a way that's going to be offensive to that person.
Which, again, goes back, because sometimes you can say it perfectly, literally, but that person, it's not necessarily, it does depend on how you deliver it, but I believe it's more of a 50-50. It depends on how you deliver it, but also the person has to be open to even try with you. Because if they're not even open to trying with you and to try to understand where you're coming from, it doesn't matter how you deliver it, they're going to take it defensively.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not just the deliverance, it's also...
You have to be open-minded.
Yeah.
To listen, be an ear to hear.
Because you could tell someone, oh, I love you. And someone could be like, oh, she was just saying that because she's just fake. She's being so, like... And you literally meant, like, hey, I really love you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you deliver it, necessarily. If they're not in the right mindset, if they're not willing to cooperate and try to be
accepting of
it. Then it doesn't matter how you deliver it.
Yeah. It's going to be pointless regardless of what you do.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But,
and that happens.
Yeah.
And that's a really big thing in finances too, because a lot of people are very set in their ways, and some people, you don't mess with their money.
Yeah.
And if they're like that, then it's almost like not even worth discussing, which can be awful in a relationship, because finances, unfortunately, play a really large role, because you have to have money to live.
Yep.
Unless you're... No, even then you have to have money to live. I think even if you were, like, completely off-grid, like, you still have to have money to live. Like, you still have to, like...
Unfortunately, we have to pay taxes.
Well, yeah. And building, like, if you want a house, like...
Costs money.
Yeah, even if you can get your own wooden... Anyways, the point is, unfortunately, you have to have money to operate.
And that's what you have to look at, and you have to be able to communicate about things like that, because that can boil over into bigger things. It may start off as a financial argument, but really it stems from something bigger.
Yeah.
It really stems from a lot more than that. But you have to be willing to communicate, and finances are a big thing, so start learning how to communicate now.
Especially if you have big goals.
Yeah.
It's important for you to have your goals align with one another, especially your big goals. Like if you want to eventually buy a house or build a house, from the ground up, or if you want to travel to a country, or if you want to live abroad, or go on a missions trip, or buy a brand new vehicle, or whatever it is you want to do. Finances, to have those goals on the same page is really important.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for hanging out with us. Please let us know if you have any particular topics you'd like for us to cover. And we appreciate you guys for being here. Bye!